I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Only Murders in the Building composer Siddhartha Khosla. First of all, Siddhartha, congratulations on your Emmy nomination.
Thank you, Rob. Always great to talk to you.
This is your seventh career nomination to date, four for This Is Us, three for Only Murders. I'm thinking, maybe it's time that you win one. I'm not sure. I'm just saying, I think you should win eventually. But no, where were you when you found out that you were nominated once again?
I was home. My whole family was back east. I was by myself and got a phone call from Jana and Alex from my team, and they shared the good news. I was surprised, if I'm honest, very surprised.
See, I know you sound very humble, and I love that. I know why you're surprised because there's just so many beautiful scores out there, and there's so much competition, so to speak. To make the cut in this category is such an achievement in itself. But I just feel like a music composition category, the Emmys, is not quite the same unless there's a Siddhartha Khosla score in there. So I'm very happy that you're there. Um,
You're kind.
Let's talk about your work on season three. It feels like it's been 10 years since season three's been out, but it's okay. We can go, we can think back, right? You're nominated for the pivotal Sits Probe episode. Um, to me, it's the episode. Like, how could you not choose it? But why did you feel this was the best representation of your work on the season?
Well, I mean, the idea for the score for this season. I mean, I always begin every season with new sort of thematic material when I can. Obviously, we have our main da 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 theme, our main one that sort of permeates the series. But then there's several new ones that come in each season. Um, and I'd written this love theme uh, uh, for Meryl Streep's character and Martin Short's character before the season started. And the story was that John Hoffman, our co-creator, Jess Rosenthal, another producer, and I were on a flight to Washington, D.C. to advocate for intellectual property protections and advocate for that in front of Congress. So we went out there, and on our flight, John gave me the whole sort of breakdown of what that season was going to be. And so as he was talking, I had my phone with me, and I just started singing a melody. And I was like, what about this for Loretta's character, for Loretta, played by Meryl Streep, as her sort of like her character. And he's like, I love that. Table it, figure it out, and let's develop that into something. It eventually became the love theme for Loretta and Oliver, and it plays a big role in this episode. And it was just a brand new theme that I was really excited about. Our orchestra sounded beautiful on this episode, as they do every episode. And how could I not pick an episode that begins with a Meryl Streep montage?
Like, honestly, it's so good. First of all, like, just to be writing compositions for the greatest actor of all time, in my humble opinion, and probably most other people, to witness that performance and then to write this beautiful new theme. But what I really like, what us fans of the show are always looking for are those little ostinatos and themes that we come to expect from Only Murders, which you referenced a little earlier. And you do obviously have to pepper them through the score. It gives us a sense of ground. We're grounded back to what we love about the show, and then you give us something new. So that must be very challenging for a composer, any composer on a show that's hitting season three, four, five, and so on, to keep it fresh and new, but also to give us what we want, give the people what they want. So talk me through that challenge.
Well, I think the core of Only Murders in the Building, and this is sort of it comes down to John Hoffman and sort of his vision for the show, and Dan Fogelman and Jess, sort of like when we all sort of conceptualized this stuff early on. You realize that this show isn't really a murder mystery. It isn't really a comedy. At the end of the day, it's a character-driven drama, and so I'm always scoring to the subtext of why these characters are here. This show is really about these three sort of disparate, lonely souls, very lonely people in many ways, who live in an apartment building in New York and find sort of happiness through their friendship with each other. And so it's a very loaded concept. I guess, of course, it's dressed up with this mystery and the murder and the intrigue and all that other stuff. But at the core of it it's an emotional sort of character study in many ways. And so it's exciting for me to sort of branch out, write new themes, just because I'm a thematic writer. I grew up as a songwriter in a band before I ever sort of composed anything for TV and film, and so it was all about like what's the chorus, it was sort of like the guiding light for me. And so for me, like each season is like almost like a new album, and I take that sort of challenge. I don't take it lightly. I want to just make sure that we're never sort of like resting on our laurels of season one and two, and make sure we're constantly pushing the envelope a little bit. And I know John Hoffman pushes me really, really hard to sort of keep on reinventing myself as much as I can on this show. And so
Yeah.
I think the idea of also getting this opportunity to score Meryl Streep's character this season, among others, Paul Rudd, and obviously not, don't forget about Steve Martin and everyone else, but there is um, something very special. And so when that task came to me, I was like, okay, she needs a special theme. And like Martin actually said early on, her sound was the French horn for me this season.
See, there's
It's
something about that instrument. I don't know
yeah,
what it is.
elegant and beautiful. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, like, if you can marry a French horn with a cello or a slash violin and then some ambient underneath it, tears will just ensue. There's just no way around it, right? And that's what you got. You want that emotion. Actually, it reminds me, there's a track, I'm pretty sure it's called Father of the Bride, where you've got so many elements in there. Like you always use beautiful mellifluous piano and guitar melodies. I love the plucky string elements that I've come to expect from an Only Murders score. So check, check. But then you really lean into some of that choral stuff that you don't use a lot, but when you do use it, I really feel like it really gives us that effect. So talk me through making making those decisions about how far you can go with bringing in all the different instrumentation and sounds that you do.
Well, I think one of the sort of magical parts of working on this show for me is that I never feel like I have a set of sort of rules that I need to follow. And it's coming from John Hoffman. And John is always sort of pushing all of us to sort of, you know, go as far as we can, and it can always be reined back if you go too far, but we never end up, sometimes I don't feel like we go far enough. And so and John is always pushing that idea. On that particular track you're talking about, that's me singing on it. um, and oftentimes some of these sort of like pieces begin with me on a piano writing it, um, and then just humming melodies and singing them and layering them with my voice, because I'm a singer. Singing voice is my main instrument. Always was as a kid, and when I was in a band, and so that's me singing on it. And so we inevitably end up keeping my vocals in there. They're from the original demos that live sort of, for months, and everyone's like, let's just leave it. And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's leave it. And there's something, I guess there is something sort of charming and innocent about just keeping that demo vocal. And like Dave was saying too, there's something imperfect about it. I'm not sitting there trying to tune my vocal or fix it or correct it. I mean, if you listen to it and you saw those vocals, you would be like, well, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. It's like, objectively, but it has emotion and feeling, and it's something that the human voice can achieve that very few instruments can. And I'm not saying it because it's my voice, but just voice in general has a sort of a lyricism to it, um, even without lyrics. So
Yeah.
I definitely leaned into that when I could this season.
Yeah, to me, a lot of this score is the earnestness of it because these three characters are so earnest. There's a lot of irony and sarcasm and silliness and broad humor and so forth, but the earnestness comes through your score because it's at the end of the day, it's about these people coming together.
Mhm.
And so my final question is really about um, how do you go for that? How do you strike the right balance with tone? Because you don't want it to be funny, but you also don't want it to be too dramatic. That must be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I've never worked on a show where I've had to strike this kind of balance. you know. It's like it's old, but it's new. It's funny, but it's dramatic. It's quirky, but it's serious. It's all of these tones, and I think it ultimately comes down to making sure the themes are strong enough to undergo the variations. So if I could write a theme that begins with sort of the emotional core of these characters, like, so for this episode, I had this sort of Meryl and Marty sort of theme that was ever present this season, and then that theme also ends up playing sort of Meryl Streep's character Loretta's conflict with with being a mother and the challenges of being a mother. Um, and so that theme, that what begins as a love theme, is also at its core a mother theme,
Mm.
because it's like these decisions that she made as a mother with Dickie. All these things play a role in sort of the decisions she's going to make later on in her life, in her love relationships, and so they're all intertwined. And so I think the key is having just that central melody and theme, and then have it sort of undergo those renovations in a way. So it's like there is like it can be dramatic, it can be quirky, it can be emotional, it can be thrilling, if that melody's ever present. Um, and I think once you have that on a show like this, when we have that glue, then I feel like I can sort of play that balance because the melody is that consistent thing that goes through it. And so also because of it, the challenge is you don't want to be too on the nose with stuff either. And so when you have a melody that's playing through drama, through humor, through comedy, through intrigue, through melancholy, all of it, it never feels quite on the nose because it's not like I'm changing the melody all of a sudden for something emotional or changing the melody
Yeah.
all of a sudden for something dramatic. It feels centered in a way that it's my cop out on the show, is that if I have this strong enough melody, I can sort of lean on it in that way. As
Yeah.
far as the balance, again, it goes down to like that main theme. I remember when I played it for John early on, he's like, that melody makes me feel equal parts melancholy as it does dramatic, as it does fun and funny and intrigue.
Yeah.
I think it's because of the major to minor changes that are happening over like the same melody. So, there'll be like a G minor, to the D major, and then the D major will go to a D minor, then back to the D major sometimes while the melody stays consistent. And so there is this sort of like, you just never know quite what it is. And I think that's what
Yeah.
helps me navigate that balance.
I love it. Sid, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate your work on this show.
Thank you for all your wonderful questions. Talk soon.